Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show live here on Patriot TV. We're excited because next week we go back to 4 days a week at 4 p.m. Eastern. And what you just watched there was a U.S. Army 30-second recruiting commercial full of white males that are in combat gear, loading up on a helicopter and then jumping out of the helicopter, landing in their parachutes, getting their combat gear together, forming up to go attack an objective, and they're all white men. We're talking with retired U.S. Army Major Chase Spears today, who was the spokesman for the U.S. Army Recruiting Command not too long ago. And one of his frustrations was that he wasn't allowed to talk about the real issues that are a large part of why we can't meet our recruiting and retention goals. And Chase, welcome back to the show, man. We appreciate you. That commercial really says it all. It says the leadership knows, right?
It absolutely does. They'll never admit it because they don't want to in any way risk embarrassing their political masters. But data is data, and at some point, rock hard reality hits, and that commercial is one indicator of it. I look at that commercial and I miss being in. You probably see I have paratrooper wings here on my my suit today. I almost called it a uniform out of habit. I mean, that being a paratrooper was something I absolutely loved. It was a way of life for me, and I see stuff like that and it inspires me. That's the kind of message that I, as a veteran, want to take to other young people and say, look at this opportunity to get to do something where you're a part of a team, where you're part of something greater than yourself, where you live a way of life that no one else understands, but your jump buddy to your right and to your left, they get it. That's the message that we need, not these messages of division, not these messages of intersectionality, not these messages of, well, one group is privileged over the other. That just sows distrust and discord in the ranks. We've had enough of that, and it's really high time that the political elite decide that they need to move on. Let the military do what the military does best, and that is to protect the nation and allow it to protect the nation instead of sending it overseas on all these foreign adventures on behalf of other nations while our own southern border is being invaded.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you nailed it. Pride and trust. Pride in your nation, pride in your own performance, and trust in your leadership, trust in your nation that they're not going to waste the life that you offer up as a blank check, if necessary, to destroy America's enemies if we're called upon to do that. Today I just tweeted out that yesterday was my 44th anniversary of getting my explosive ordnance disposal badge pinned on as an E1 by a big giant Marine Corps first lieutenant that I'd spent a year with. And everything. And that's because it's a huge achievement to be able to accomplish something like that while serving your country and earning the trust of your teammates. And it didn't matter whether that big Cajun lieutenant or the U.S. Marine Corps warrant officer who was a black combat veteran that saved me from failing out of that course, which has a over 50% attrition rate in it. That's what we're talking about. It's not that we only want white men to sign up. Is what we want Americans to sign up and be trained and professionally educated to trust each other. Because when we go to war, when the bullets are flying and the bombs are dropping and the rockets and artillery shells are coming in at you, and you got to go into it to achieve an objective so that we can win and defeat our enemies, you have to have complete and utter trust in each other before anything else. And Marxist critical theory of all types, race, gender, queer, all of it, destroy that trust based on an immutable characteristic. It's usually skin color. And that's unacceptable in the United States in general, and unacceptable in the United States Armed Forces. And we have to root it out of every single institution, ladies and gentlemen. We absolutely do, because we will not win ever again, whether it's in the military or in industry or in services or in IT or big tech. We will not win if we are indoctrinating our young people to not trust each other because of something like skin color. It just will not work, Chase. Well, what do you think uh, the Army leadership's thinking about, because when you contrast that commercial with the two commercials that we saw a year ago, about a year ago, I think it was, where you had these cartoony type commercials. One's a transgender girl, a man wanting to be a girl, and the other's a young lady with two moms or something like that. And the contrast then was with Russian recruiting commercials that looked and felt a lot like that 30-second U.S. Army commercial that just came out. Did What decision process was occurring during that time period that has led us to that commercial we just saw today, or is it just it was forced because the numbers are what they are?
That's a really good question. I'll have to hypothesize on that. I suspect a large part of it is at some point the bean counters had to acknowledge reality and say, okay, we are now 3 years into this thing, into this recruiting crisis. What we're doing is not working. We have been telling an entire our bread and butter population for recruiting that they're not wanted, that they're a problem, that they are privileged, and that we could do better without them in the military. And at some point, they saw the impacts of that. I think that's probably part of it. I think another potential part of it, and again, I'm theorizing here, is we have a new Army Chief of Staff, General Randy George. And General George has really been big since he came in from day one about lethality and ability to conduct warfare is the priority of the Army. Every chief of staff comes in, has a different priority. His predecessor, it was people strategy, which I appreciated the theory of, but its application was somewhat laughable. Predecessor before that had a different strategy. General Odierno had stopping sexual assault in the ranks. That was his number one priority. And I remember thinking, well, that's interesting. I mean, I want sexual assault in the ranks to go away entirely too, but we also are supposed to train on war fighting as well. General George has brought in a much more tactical mindset from talking to my friends who are still in the uniform, reading the things that General George is saying. So I don't know where General George comes down politically, and that's exactly as it should be. It seems like some leadership at the top has changed out, and they're understanding if we want to prevent the continued decline of the force, we have to put the brakes on this and pivot direction. And so I'm pleased to see at least one indicator there with that commercial that it seems like a slight course adjustment is happening. But it's going to have to go even higher than that. The next president is going to have to be very deliberate about doing some cleaning house at the Pentagon. We need a defense secretary who is not an activist, who's a warfighter, and we need a president who sees the military as an agent of defending the nation, not as an agent for social experimentation.
Yeah, I'm glad you went there, because it's one of the things I wanted to ask you after I found out what your dissertation is on in your PhD program is. Uh, you're obviously doing a lot of research and looking at primary documents, talking to actual individuals, surveying them, and those kind of things. What are you learning about the reality of a politicized military, which we have today, really, and what the impacts of that will be moving into the future forward, if it's not done away with, so that we're back to what you and I are used to. Definitely in my career, it was always about you're nonpartisan. We don't get into politics. Even the political generals at the top didn't get into politics, other than the politics of competing to get the job, and those and get promoted and those kind of things. So, you know, uh, what's your research showing you in your doctorate program, that two things. One, how bad is it really if you've gotten there yet? And what are folks saying about what needs to be done as we move forward to eradicate that and return to a nonpartisan military?
Yeah, you're absolutely right about the nonpartisan norm. That's been something that's really kind of been a big thing since the 1950s. Started with the ideas of Samuel Huntington in his book, The Soldier and the State. Now, you and I, as warfighters, we know that as Clausewitz said, war is an extension of policy. War is policy under force of arms on behalf of nation. But we have held in the U.S. military for about the last 70 years a nonpartisan norm, which we called kind of an apolitical norm. That's what General Milley likes to talk about a lot. And the idea was, yes, we all have our different perspectives. We're all citizens, but you don't bring that into work. Here, when we're in uniform, when we're together, when we're in formation, we are united, and we speak about the things that unite us, and we look for the things that unite us because we have to have complete trust in each other. And what I'm finding in my research, sadly, confirms much of what my experience was, and I was hoping it wouldn't, is that we are now reaching the point where if you say something that is politically aligned to a progressive way of thought, a Marxian way of thought, that's apparently
Mhm.
not considered political anymore. That's just you're principled or you're socially aware. Whereas if you're a principally conservative person, if you have a traditional point of view, i.e., you were born a man or a woman, something that controversial, that you're now, if you say something like that, you're engaged in politics, and it is appropriate for you to be institutionally shamed and silenced. And there is absolutely, I experienced a spiral of silence during my time in. I watched and observed many spirals of silence. I have many friends in who think like me, but they are deathly afraid to say anything. They're just trying to stay under the radar and write it out. And I'm seeing that in my dissertation research as well with veterans who got out in the last few years as well, that they're openly saying their understanding of politics is if you say something aligns to a traditional way of thinking, that now you are outside what the institution believes to be acceptable, and it had major trust implications for them.
Yeah, and that's an unacceptable institutional path. Well, let's go back to the live audience for a quick question before the break. Shell, Kat, what do you have over there?
Elizabeth, go ahead.
Thank you, Kat, and thank you, Colonel. One of my questions, and I don't know if anybody can even answer it. It's going to be I think, a wait and see. But my question is, do you think if we can get President Trump back into office or somebody that's got more conservative values, do you think that our military can be saved and gotten rid of some of this mental illness that's going on?
Well, that's a great question. That's exactly what we were talking about just now, Chase. I mean, you didn't mention it specifically, but I would imagine that if I use the phrase "America is great," I love America, and the words "Make America Great Again" happen to spill out of my mouth, even though those are non-political words. Those are patriotic words. Really, that's the way I see it. If I have a hat on that says that, I see it as a patriotic word, not a partisan or a political word or set of values that you would get the treatment over to you about 20 seconds before the break.
Yeah, you would absolutely get the treatment. To answer the question, I believe the institution can be saved, but it's going to be a long, hard, concerted effort. Personnel is policy, and one of President Trump's biggest mistakes was assuming that the generals were all of traditional thinking and that they all loved the institution, and that they were insulated from politics. I hope he's learned that lesson, and if he's reelected, he's got to be forceful in personnel.
Absolutely right. All this is about readiness and the ability to deter or win a war if we have to. And we'll talk about the 90 to midnight doomsday clock and our American readiness and deterrence capability on the backside of this break. I'm Rob Maness, live here on Patriot TV. We'll be right back.